in that field. So let me actually switch to the right project. I'm just opening that in a different window, because I've cloned the project into another one, but it seems I've deleted the items from the wrong project. So just give me a second. I'll try to solve that. So all these items I have in draft, I want to delete them. So I only want to work with the content item I created yesterday. That's Michael. So just deleting the rest. So I just cloned the project in case I do something wrong. I don't want to break the whole implementation. So for that reason, I cloned the project, and we should be good to go at this point. So let me just put this back here. So here we have Michael as an invitee, all the other objects here as well. And the problem that I'm having right now with GridSum is that there is a photo field, that's an asset field, and there is nothing there. And that's why the GridSum plugin complains. So I'm just gonna unpublish that, and I'm gonna put here any picture. So I'll see if I have anything, like this logo here, for example. That's fine. So let me just publish this again, and we should be fine. So when I run the project now, okay, there is no error anymore. So let's see if this works. Michael Kincaid. Okay, here we go. The website is up and running, and the component is actually here. So this is something I will need to do as a dynamic component, not as a static one. And in order to do that, I don't actually want to expose the project ID. So the project ID is what you see here in the URL. When you have this project ID, you can actually get all the items from the project. So if I go here into my browser and go to deliver content.ai/items, oh, I think I have to include the project here as well. So you see, I can query all the items. So I don't really want to expose that for the static site, because that would mean that any attendee could just take the GUID and query the system for all items that are there. So instead, I'm going to create a serverless function. I have a good experience with Netlify, so I'm going to be creating a Netlify function that would actually get me the right item, and the item is actually already defined in the component. So it needs this kind of data, the accommodation data, and I'm going to get them by the code name or ID. It doesn't matter which one. But I think, let me check actually how the filter is going to look like. So filter delivery. So I'm just going to check the documentation, how the filter is going to look like. So this is the standard call for all items. And if you want to filter those items, we need a code name for that. And this is how we're going to do that. So system.type. And we're actually looking at not type, but system dot, where do we have Michael? So this is reception, here is Michael. So this is the content item of type invitee, and his ID is actually this number. So the idea is that whenever I want to render this component, it will know that the component has an ID of Michael's invite, and will get all the additional data on the fly using the serverless function. So instead of accommodation object here, I'm going to get an ID of Michael's invite. And obviously I can then query the system for system.id. And you see I'm getting just that item with Michael. I assume I will also get the accommodation object, but there's just one value here, and that's the link to the accommodation object, because this is the first depth. In the modular content, I think there should be additional information, but this is just the timeline items. There is nothing. Oh, there is the accommodation as well. So you see I get the accommodation as well. At this point, I could also optimize this call. So I could go and ask just for the type accommodation, but I would have to know the ID. So instead of the invitee ID, I would have to get the ID of the actual accommodation. So here I can do that. This is just a code name, but code name is going to also work. So what we can do is ask for items, where system type is going to be accommodation, and system.codename is going to be the one that I got from the value here. So you see I'm going to get Michael's accommodation, just the one object where I see the option, I see how many, I see the note and everything. So this is essentially the data set I will need for the RSVP component. So let's go here and change that. Let's change this to accommodation codename, which is going to be a string. So this is obviously not going to work now, but let me change this thing then. This is the parent component, and I'm going to change the accommodation to accommodation underscore codename, which is going to be a prop that will be here as well. So this is also going to be accommodation codename. And the last part is the invitee. So we're looking at accommodation option codename, but at this point we don't need any of these things. So I'm only looking for accommodation. If we go back, I'm looking for accommodation and value here. So accommodation and value, this is going to be an array. So I'm going to have to get the first item from the array. So accommodation value, so I'm going to have to change this as well to accommodation code name, and it's going to be page invitee accommodation, the first item of the array. So accommodation.value and the first item, which is going to be this value. At least that's the hope. Let me check that in here. So we're going to go for localhost /explore. Okay, we're getting error here, accommodation value. Cannot query for field value on type accommodation. Okay, this might be specific of the GridSum plugin, so let's see what we have there. We're looking for accommodation, just for accommodation, let's say. Okay, so we need a selection of subfields. So what do we have here? Maybe your code name. So that's what I'm looking for. So I don't really need to do the array stuff because the GridSum plugin is already doing that for me. So the only thing I need to do is just ask for the code name. So I'm going to change this here, accommodation code name. And this then will not work with arrays, but it's going to go page invitee, accommodation, and code name. Perfect. So when we go back here into the RSVP accommodation.view component, we get the code name here, but once this component actually gets rendered, I'm going to have to call a function that will go into, that will actually call the serverless function to give me the data. So at this point, I think I can go ahead and create that. So let me just create here. Oh, there is already one. There's already a project called Netlify. So I'm just going to use that one. I think I already wanted to do that. So this is, yeah. Let me open that in Visual Studio Code so that will make it more understandable. So this is just a blank project for Netlify serverless functions. The only thing I did is I went to Netlify functions, and I think that there is a nice tutorial somewhere. So here in the docs. So built with JavaScript. So here it's actually described how you can create Netlify functions. I'm going to get to that in a second. But it's as easy as installing one NuGet package so that you can run those functions locally. So I think that's going to be described here. So to configure the functions folder, there's always a netlify.toml file. I already have that one here. Here it is. So the only thing I have in the build are functions, Lambda functions, right? All the functions that are here in the functions folder, let me actually make this a bit bigger. So all the functions that are here will actually be taken as functions and will be deployed and will be accessible publicly. Now this is something that I copied from another project, so just don't get frightened because of these things. I'm just gonna remove this whole thing except for return because I still want to do that. But the important thing is that I'm getting the .env file here. So in the file is not yet here, but that file is used to hold my project ID, content project ID, and the content delivery. That's yet another package that allows me to get the data from the headless CMS. So that's the same thing that the GridSum plugin does, but here I'm doing that in scope of the Netlify function. So let's say that, and I'm going to rename this. This is going to be called, let's say, delivery. Okay. Now, first of all, let me create the .env file. And here I'm just going to create one file. So let's check how the .env file looks like. So this is the package that I think I have already installed there. Let me see in the package.json. Right, so the dependency is .env 8.2.0. So that's exactly what this thing does. We have to do this as early as possible in the application. And I think that's exactly what I'm doing here. So that's in the documentation. And the .env file, so I have to create that one in the root directory of my project and actually include the environmental variables there. So let's just call this project ID or content project ID. And I'm just going to copy over the ID from content. So that's this ID, that's the project. I think this could be defined like this. Or it maybe doesn't need to be. Well, let's try it without the quotes. And we'll see what that does. So what the .env does is it will make sure that this variable holds this value, so I don't have to work with this value in my function. So that's what this does. Now, in the scope of the function, I need to do a few things. So first of all, I need to get data from content, and that's accommodation data. And in order to do that, I need to know what is the code name of the file, or what is the code, or what is the ID of attendee or invitee. So this needs to come in the request. This actually ensures that not everyone is able to request the data from the system. And based on this information, I'm going to get the data from content. And then, of course, I'm going to return status code 200 and body if there is anything. So first of all, let's take a look at this thing. So let's take a look at this tutorial, and I'm gonna try to find a piece of code that actually takes data from the function, from the request. So there is event context and callback. I think the context should contain the information that I'm looking for. Let's try to run that actually. So I'm gonna close this site and let's go to Netlify and let me find the runtime settings and how do I run that locally. So this is the local function development. And I think this function is already created, so I'm looking to run that. So local development. So I think it's this part. Netlify functions invoke. Let's try that. What's it gonna do? So Netlify is not recognized as the name of a CMDlet. Okay, that's probably because I don't have Netlify installed here, because this is my desktop computer that I'm working on right now. So let me fix that. I'm gonna install Netlify dev. So that's this part here. This should take a second. And right after I should be able to run the Netlify functions. So this is great. You can actually run all the functions locally. You don't have to deploy anything. You can test if it works. And once you're ready, you can actually commit all the functions into GitHub. And Netlify lets you deploy those functions directly from GitHub. So that's really great. It's really a matter of seconds, not even minutes, till you can get the Netlify functions up and running. And you can still test them locally. So let's give it a second till this is done. And in the meantime, I'm going to create another function here. And that's going to be, let's say, action.js. Now this is a function that goes the other way around, that takes the action that occurred on the website, on the static site, will take the data and put it back into content. Now, in order to do that, I will probably need the same thing, but I will also need one additional thing into the environmental file, and that's going to be the content management API key. Now, that allows me to change the data using the content management SDK. So let's take a look here in the project settings under API keys. I can create not preview, but management API. So I'm going to copy the key. It's a bit longer than that, so even though you don't see it, it is longer. And let's call this one content CM API or content management key. So I'm going to put that into the environmental file as well. Then I can just use this constant anywhere in the function and it will work. So do we have the Netlify functions installed? It seems so. So let's try to invoke those. Okay, pick a function to trigger. Let's trigger delivery. Invoke with emulated Netlify authentication headers. No. Okay, connection refused. So something's wrong here. E-connection refused. Let's try it again. Let's try delivery. So we're still getting e-connection refused. So let's take a look. Let's ask Google what that means. Okay, here we go. It cannot connect. So make sure that you notify def running in another command line window so that the functions are accessible. Okay. Let's try that. So notify def. Okay, that sounds better. So let's now call delivery or deliver. Did I call it deliver or delivery? Delivery. Okay, not found. Not found. Let's try it this way. Okay. So this is much better. Now this seems to be invoking the function. It says that it cannot find module.env. Let me see. That might be because I did not install the packages. So let me actually go back and call npm install. And by the way, guys, if you know something better than I do, let me know in the chat. That's faster than Google. So sometimes I just stumble upon things that are just stupid and easy to solve. And for some reason I can't. So just let me know, or just let me know that you're here, that you're listening, or what you want to know. I'm happy to answer your questions. So we're still installing. So let's go back here for a moment. So here in this is delivered, it's fine, but in case of action, the scope is going to be a bit different. So first of all, in the context, we're going to need to get also the ID of invitee. This is the other direction, yeah, that comes from the website. So there's also on every request, there's going to be ID of the invitee so that we know which attendee is actually clicking on the site. And we're also going to need to know what type of data. So in that case, I'm going to get the code name of type we want to change. And of course the data in JSON. And we're going to use the CM API to send the data to content. So this is still installing. So what I can do in the meantime is take a look at content CM API SDK. And obviously I'm using Netlify with JavaScript. So I want to get a JavaScript content management SDK. Oh, this is a .NET one. Is there? There isn't. So let's take a look at Google again. So here we go. This is the content delivery SDK. But we're looking for content management, so this one. And I think that there is an NPM package that I could use, right? There is a RxJS and content management. So I'm gonna have to install those as well. This is still installing, so that's quite a while. So what we're gonna need are these two packages, because I think that the delivery one is already in the package JSON, isn't it? No, it isn't actually. Okay, we're gonna need that one as well then. So we're gonna need these two. Let me just create a new file here and save it there, and we're gonna need the delivery SDK package as well. That's this one. Okay, we're fine here. So the next thing I'm gonna install Let me just copy those things. Okay, so we got the RxJS. Still waiting for a few more. So I can discard this file. Perfect, so we're done. Let's see if Netlify dev will work now. Okay, that seems to work. And this is my function. Let's try to call it again. Now it responds okay. So it seems that the Netlify function is up and running. And now I need to actually take the data from the request. So I could just take the ID this way and try to output it here, just as a quick test. Now, what I want to do here is just to figure out how this works. So I'm just going to console log context to see where I get the data. And let's take a look here. So the client context is nothing. So I'm probably using the wrong object here. Let's try to use event. Okay, let me run this again. Yeah, here we go. So in the event, I get headers, but I also get the query string parameters. And you see that here is a parameter called ID and it's hello world. So that's exactly what I'm looking for. So let's take a look how we can do this. So let ID is gonna be event query string parameters, and that's an object with an ID. Now what we can do is check if event is not null and event query string parameters is not null and even query string parameters ID is not null, and then do the stuff, or do it the other way around. So if event is null or query string parameters are null or ID is null, in that case we're gonna return. So what's the status code for bad request? Is it 401? It's 400 actually. So we're gonna return 400 and we're gonna say that ID is missing. Okay, at this point we already have an ID. So when we have the ID of invitee, that's actually safer than codename. It's harder to guess. So I'm gonna use the ID and then I need to get the data from content. Now the query that does that, I think that was the other window. Or did I close that? Oh, here it is. So this is what I was looking for. So this gets me the ID, and I'm actually only looking for element called accommodation. Just for this one, for the value of that one, for the code name. I can also do it the other way around, just to ask for the, and actually if I ask for this element, it's gonna give me this one as well with the timeline items and with the accommodation. So what I can do is I can actually filter this. So the system ID is gonna be this ID. System type is gonna be either invitee or accommodation. Because if I do this way, if I do it this way, it's not gonna return anything. So I have to return both items. So both types actually. I think I'm doing something wrong here. Let me check the documentation. So this is actually filtering content items. And we are looking for so this is system type, limit 3, order, no. I'm looking for elements. Let's take a look at this sample. So this is taxonomy. So this is called, I think it's called projection, that we define only the items that we want. But okay, let's forget about that now. I'm just gonna leave it without that filter. I'm gonna get everything, and I'm just gonna take the accommodation object, and that actually has the elements here. So this is what I'm essentially looking for. So let's try to use the delivery SDK in the delivery. And in order to do that, let me actually check one of my other Netlify functions, so that we don't have to figure this out from the start. I hope I have that here actually. Or maybe I have it on GitHub. That would be the best place where to look for it. So let me just go to my GitHub. Let's try to find, I think I call it Netlify. It's from one of my previous Twitches. And here I have definitely two functions, to check location and check permits. I'm gonna go for check location because that one has the content delivery here. So this is the content delivery SDK, and I think I had that already here, so that's fine. And let's check where we are using that. So here it is. So I'm getting the Candico project ID from the process env. So I already have the .env file there. And the delivery client is initialized by the project ID. And then we just define what we want and output the data. So I'm just gonna copy and paste that here. So again, I'm getting not content project ID because in my .env file it's called differently. So I have one additional underscore there. From process.env, the delivery client will be initialized with that ID. And then we're gonna get the invitee object from the delivery client. So we're looking for type invitee. And let's first output it to see how it looks like. Okay, let's try to do it now. Where is that? There it is. So if I do a hello world function, I guess I will not get anything, but I did get something. And that's because I forgot to do any filtering here. So what we want to do here is also filter. And I think it's, so we're looking for ID. Let's take a look at the documentation actually. I don't really remember by heart how that SDK is supposed to get the data. So this is the delivery SDK, and let's take a look at how that looks like. So we're looking for items, Now we don't have the types there, so we're gonna define the types this way, but we wanna filter them based on the ID, which is not shown here. So let's take a look at the full documentation. And I'm looking for filters. This is only types. Models. So there are the parameters. And we are looking for not elements, but filtering. And we're looking for equals filter. And we want to compare the system.id with the ID that we have here. So we're looking for equals filter. Now the element is called system.id, and the value is the ID we got from the request. So let's see how that's gonna work. So it's reloading, and I think we can try it again. And we got 0 response, which is correct because there is nothing under ID hello world. So let me just try this ID now. Okay, now we got what we needed. So there are a bunch of items here, and we only want one. We only want the accommodation. So we can also go ahead and filter the elements. Now the how to do that is also in the documentation. So let me just check that. So we want the type, that's fine, but we are looking for elements parameter. Now let's try to use it. There is no demo here on the page, but let's try to use it. I think this is a string array of the elements, so we are looking for accommodation. But I think this will also exclude all the nested fields, so we'll see. Okay, let's go back down. Now we got a bunch of stuff. So this is the response. We got items here, but a lot of other stuff. So it doesn't seem to filter it properly. Let's try to show only the first item. Okay, it seems to be doing something. Let me just start this again. Okay, we got okay. Now you see that the request now contains content item. It does have some standard information like name, code name, and so on. But apart from that, I only get the accommodation field, which is the linked items element. And there is a value which is actually the content item. So this is what I'm looking for. So the elements work. So let's now take a look at what's inside. So we're first probably gonna need to check that. So let accommodation equals invitee items 0 and accommodation. And of course some checks here. So if invitee is nothing or invitee items is null or invitee items 0 is null. Then we want to return the same thing. Now it depends how strict we want to be in terms of security. So we could just say, hey, this invitee is not does not exist, so that would be 404. But we can say no invitee with provided ID, for example, right? Or you could just again say 400 as a bad request if the ID is not existing. Up to you what your security actually is. I'm fine with this right now. So in case everything is fine, then we're gonna go for accommodation, and we can then display it in the console again. So let me start it again. That seems to be safer. Cool. So when I run this again, I'm getting the linked items element, which contains information about Michael's accommodation. So in this case, I have the data here, and there is a content item, but what I'm looking for is the elements from this content item actually. So in order to have them there, I have to adjust the elements parameter, not to only look for accommodation, but also look for option, type, and a node. Because when we look into content, we go back to the accommodation object, there are three things: option, how many, and node, which all of them I want. So when I go here and take a look at the content type, accommodation, and I want to see the code names of that. So the code name is option, how many, and node. So that's essentially what I want to have here. So option, not type, but how many, and node. Let's try it again. Oh, not deliver, but this part. So right now you see that I get the value of the item, and here I also see option, how many, and node. So that's essentially what I want. Inside the option I have multiple choice element. These are just the strings, right? So I can just go for value, and I can start building the object. So this is accommodation. We're looking for a value, which is another object. And now what I can do is I can say, let's call that response. That's going to be another object, and the option will be accommodation, and we are looking for option. So that's this part, value and option. And that's a multiple choice element. So I'm gonna need to go for the first item in the list. That's the one that's selected, and its value. So option 0, value. How many? And node is gonna be easier. So I just need to go for how many dot value, and the node is gonna be accommodation node value. Now in this case, this is always going to be an empty string in the worst case. In case of the option, it's not that easy, because if no option is selected, then the option 0 will be null. So in that case, I have to do a few checks here. So if accommodation.option is null, or array actually I can do it this way, accommodation option length is 0. In the case it's an empty array. I'm not sure if we have actually null there or empty array, so I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to check for both. If that's the case, then I'm gonna just return an empty string. Otherwise, as accommodation option 0 and value. And let's log the response into the console. Okay, and let's see what do we have here. Cannot read property value of undefined. It's 38. Okay, so you see that we have this one is undefined, or the value is undefined. Not sure how that happened. Let's take a look. Accommodation, how many? Let's try to output this before it actually fails with undefined. Okay, it's here. Okay, this still failed, but we should see something here, undefined. Okay. How come we have undefined here when the how many is text element? So I'm probably doing something wrong here. So when we did the linked items element, which was this, we were looking for value, which is this. And this is actually first item of a list. So I'm missing here the index 0. Like the item 0 is null. So in the case, so there is also another case when the accommodation object is not defined. So if that's the case, that's a different case because that's not 404 error. So if invitee items 0 accommodation, that value is empty. So this should always be an array. So we can check if the length is 0. In that case, we don't want to return 404, but we want to return an empty object. In this case, the invitee never set any value into the form. So in that case, we want to still return OK. But the object, so let's define the object here. So response, in that case, option's gonna be nothing. How many is gonna be nothing. And node is also gonna be nothing. I guess we can actually do it here. So define object that way, we can actually remove this part. But if the length is 1, we can do everything else here. Otherwise, the object is is already initialized with nothing. So we're just gonna fill the object in case it's already filled. So I can remove that. And here we can do console log response, and we'll see if we got something now. Okay, we're still getting errors. So cannot read property value of undefined in delivery.js 45. Here. Okay. Let's log accommodation again. So accommodation object is a content item that has the option here. It has how many? It has the node. So accommodation.option is this object. So that's not null. Accommodation option length is obviously wrong because this is not an array. So I cannot check for this. So the option is just one multiple choice element and its value is what I'm looking for. So I'm looking for option.value. So if this is null, or accommodation option value length is 0. So I think that was the mistake. Otherwise, we're looking at option.value, the first value in the list, and we're looking for code name. We'll see if that works. Just for the sake of the log, I'm just going to output here options and value. Okay, let's try it now. We're still getting an error here. 500. Cannot read the value of undefined again. On line 43. Okay, so accommodation options, sorry, the typo there. Okay, so this seems to work. The response is option not interested. How many is 2 and node is nothing. Let's check if here is the same. So when we go back to Michael's invitee object, how many invited is 2 and his accommodation, oh sorry, that was not the right field. The right field is here, how many is 2, and he's not interested. So we're getting the right data. So we're happy with the response now. So I can remove the log output and actually return the data in the body of the request instead of OK. So return status code, and here we do response. Let's see if that's gonna work. Incorrect function response body. That's probably because I have to make a JSON out of it. So let me also check the other function on GitHub. How did I do that here? So here I always returned OK. How about this part? I can always return OK. So let's see. Netlify function return object. Let's check that. So body is a JSON string, so I have to make a JSON string out of the object. Now let's see, JSON.stringify. That's what I'm looking for. Perfect, so that's exactly what I want. In case I put here a wrong ID, I get 404. If I provide the right ID, I get exactly what I needed. So this is essentially something that I'm gonna be calling from the grid sum app. Now, I can close this for now, and I'm gonna go back into the view project. So that's this part. And back into the RSVP accommodation component. Now, whenever this component is loaded, I think that there is a special function, Vue.js on load function. Let's see what we have there. Not before mount, but let's see. Called synchronously after instance has just been initialized. Before mount, before update, mounted. I think mounted. I always used mounted, so I'll try to use that one. So let's just copy this over. And what we're going to do, we're going to do a simple simple call to the serverless function. Right now the function is at this URL. And this is going to be the ID that I'm looking for. So we're not going to go for accommodation codename, but rather invitee ID. So I'm just going to change all the components again. Invitee ID. It's going to be a string that is coming from content. This is all fine. But we're also going to need to define it here. So we're not looking just for salutation, how many invited, and so on. But we're also looking for ID, and I'm not sure if we actually have it there as a system field. So let me check. Let me check in the Explorer. Oh, I forgot to run it. So let me just go back into the project. So it's this part. Grid sum develop. Now that should run the server and should give me the Explorer interface. Perfect. And I'm looking for, in the node here, I'm looking for ID. So you see it's right beneath the node. Usually it's a system ID, and here in this plugin it's just an ID. So I'm just going to add it here. And I actually already have the ID here in this place, but I'm just going to add it here anyway, so I have it available in the list. So here, instead of accommodation codename, I'm going to go for invitee ID. And that's going to make it simpler. I'm just going to put here ID. So we're going to get the invitee ID into RSVP. And as an invitee ID, it's going to make its way to the RSVP accommodation. And here we have it as a prop. So what we can do here. No, we don't want to do that. So here I can just use this props invitee ID. So the URL will be http localhost / this part. And ID is going to be this props invitee ID. Now we're going to need to make the call. So let's see how we can do that with Vue.js. I'm just thinking if I ever used it on a project before. I think I did. And I think I'm actually using that on my personal site. So let me check. Let me check my personal site repository. Why is this one actually? But let's switch to a branch source. And I think I'm doing that with the form submission controller. So that's here. So I'm using the fetch API here. So something along these lines. And I think I'm gonna need to... Oh, I don't actually. So fetch is supported automatically. So we're fetching the URL. We don't need to provide anything in the body. Let's see. Input request info, init request init. We don't have to provide that. In terms of headers, we don't have any content, so we can omit that. Oh, let me actually fetch API get response. I think that's always the best to check already working examples. So we're fetching this URL and then looking for a response. I think this is exactly what I'm looking for. So we're fetching the URL. And when we get the response, we actually call the JSON function. I think this should give us an object. Or this actually gives us the JSON. Let's check what we actually get there. I think this will actually give us the object, but we'll see. So my JSON, and here we're gonna log it to console. I think that's fine for now. And this is the end of the function, which is great. I'm just gonna log the URL here as well to just make sure we get the right URL here. And let's see. So the site is running. Michael Kincaid. Okay, let's check the console. Cannot read property 0 of undefined. Invitee ID of undefined. So something's wrong here. Invitee ID. So the error occurs at view component mounted. So that's in our function. That might be just because I'm doing something wrong here, but I think that should be okay. Property or method accommodation is not defined on the instance. Okay, so it seems like there is, well, for one thing, I should comment this out. Clear it and refresh the page. Oh, it takes way too long. Let me start it again. Okay, let's take a look at the console. So still cannot read property invitee ID of undefined, but otherwise we're fine. So let me just do one check here to make sure we do have the invitee ID in the component. And we do actually. This is the right ID. That's what I'm looking for, 58 EAC. That's right. So we're probably doing something wrong in the function. So it's probably not using the props. Let's try if this is gonna work. Okay, that seems to work well because access to fetch at this stuff has been blocked by course policy. That's right. No access control origin header is present on the requested resource. This is always a pain whenever we're working on requests that are going from one domain to another. So we have to add here these headers. Let's try if we can do this part. Requests mode no course. So let's check again. So the fetch URL, and then the option should be here to mode course. So fetch URL. Okay, we can leave the method there as well. So method is gonna be get, and mode will be no course, please. Let's see if this is gonna work. So let's clear this and refresh the page. Unexpected end of input. Okay, that's much better. So this is the URL, and the URL is fine. If we go there, we get the data. So we got unexpected end of input for some reason, but the JSON looks good to me. How many? That's fine. So let's log the response here to see what's going on there. So response status is 0. Headers and body is null, which is not true. So we're not getting any response here for some reason. I'm just checking if this is the real response or if this is just the course response. Let's try to use Postman and to simulate the same request. And we can also check what's going on here. So here we got the right request, and let's try it again. We'll see if the request actually makes its way. So I'm just going to try to refresh the page, which should create the request, and the request was responded with 200. So the request is processed and the data go back to the website, but here we're not getting anything. So let me check what seems to be the issue here. If we're using fetch, You can add here the header for content type application JSON. Not convinced that this is gonna help, but it's worth trying. We could also try to log response.json, but given that we have nothing there, end of input. Okay, so here we're getting the error. Delivery ID, that's fine. And the response is still empty. Okay, let's try to do Postman. So I'm just gonna create a new one for localhost. I think I have that somewhere over here. There is my function. So let's try to use Postman. I'm just gonna remove the headers. So we're not using any. There is nothing in the body, and there are no params. Oh, sorry, there is one param ID. Let's try that. And we do get the data. So for some reason, we're not getting the data here in the Vue.js component. So no credentials are necessary here. We're working with promises, so no await is necessary there. So we're just fetching. We don't need the header. And when we get the response, we got empty response. So let's try Google again. Fetch gives an empty response body. That sounds right. I think this is also my case, opaque response. So let's see. So we are actually using Netlify functions, and we need to do something about that, it seems. Of course, so this guy was using Express. So this is what I'm already doing. So I don't think that the problem is here. Fetch URL, then read the body as a string, read the body as a JSON payload. So this is what I'm doing actually. Fetch URL, then fetch URL, then response, response JSON. Let's try to do it exactly like those guys are doing it. And then do another response, my JSON, console log JSON. I think this is good. So let's see if that's gonna make any difference. I don't think so, but we'll see in a second. No, we're still getting the same thing here. Uncaught and all right, I think it's something something with the course. Not sure what that causes this currently, but I'll try to look into that because I'm running from time, running out of time. So I'll be looking into this, guys, and I will let you know because I have to get this working through the weekend. And this is actually the last part. Once I get the data in the component here, then I'm going to be able to compose the component, because then it's just a matter of defining the radio buttons, to define which radio button is checked when. And then whenever the selection changes, I'm just gonna take the data and the same way through the notify function actually update the data in content. So I'm gonna try to create another Twitch about that, but I'm just gonna try to figure this out today. I'm not sure why I'm not getting any data here. Maybe I'm doing something wrong here. If you guys do have any ideas, let me know. Otherwise, I'll figure it out on my own, and I'll get back with another Twitch about the other way around, with getting the data from the website back to the headless CMS. So I'm not sure when that's going to happen. I'll update you on my Twitter, so look at my Twitter if you're interested, and I'll see you next time. All right, thanks guys. Have a good rest of the day.